do find the defendant, Anthony Sowell, guilty of aggravated murder, to wit.
The verdict is in for Anthony Sowell, and he is guilty on almost every count: murder, abuse of a corpse, and kidnapping.
But Leon, the case isn't over, even though the verdict is in. We have team coverage of the case that changed so many lives.
We begin this night with our chief investigator for News Channel 5, Ron Regan, reporting from the Justice Center. Here now is Ron.
Well, Leon, as soon as the jury walked into the courtroom and sat in the jury box, I looked across, and as soon as they began reading the verdict, you could quickly see in the eyes of jurors what a strain this was. Two of the jurors' eyes began to fill up with tears. It was that much of an emotional toll for them. I looked over to the left of me, and family members sat hugging each other, praying, holding each other, as Anthony Sowell's name and the word guilty was announced 82 times.
Count 1, the charge of aggravated murder. We, the jury in this case, being duly impaneled and sworn, do find the defendant, Anthony Sowell, guilty of aggravated murder, purposely and with prior calculation and design, caused the death of TONIA Carmichael.
As the verdict was read, so were the names of Sowell's victims: TONIA Carmichael, Nancy Cobbs, Crystal Dozier, Talacia Fortson, AMELDA Hunter, LaShonda Long, Michelle Mason, Kim Smith, Janice Webb, TISHANA CULVER, and Diane Turner.
With respect to the charge in count 7, as it relates to the aggravated murder of Nancy Cobbs, the jury, being duly paneled and sworn, finds the defendant guilty of the aggravated murder of Nancy Cobbs.
Sowell's lawyers tried to convince the jury that there was no DNA or fingerprints tying Sowell to the scene, but 11 bodies found inside his home was all the evidence they needed.
Count 14, the charges the aggravated murder of TISHANA Culver under Revised Code Section 2903.01 subsection B. In that count, all 12 jurors have found that the defendant is guilty of the charge of aggravated murder in purposely causing the death of TISHANA Culver.
The jury will now decide whether Sowell lives or dies. Meanwhile, family and friends of the victims are relieved that this part of the trial is over.
There was storming outside. Sowell's conviction is a breath of sunshine to the community, the grassroots community, and all of those that believe that this was such an unprecedented ordeal that we had to get some degree of closure. It is not over yet until the jury decides whether he will receive the death penalty.
And the next time jurors return here to the courthouse and take their seats will be for what's called the mitigation phase, the punishment phase, that decides whether he will live or die, and that is scheduled to begin Monday, August 1st. I'll have a lot more on this very, very important and gripping story tonight at 6 o'clock, live at the Justice Center. I'm Chief Investigator Ron Regan.
Many thanks, Ron Regan, for handling the story for us, count after count. It took a long time to read that verdict. Danita?
Well, the verdict means long-awaited justice for the victims. The murdered women began disappearing in 2007. During the trial, prosecutors say Sowell lured them to his home with the promise of alcohol or drugs. Police discovered the first 2 bodies and a freshly dug grave in late 2009 after officers went to investigate a woman's report that she had been raped there. After the first 2 bodies, police began to find more and then more. A total of 11 found in and around Sowell's Imperial Avenue home. Our team coverage continues now with Paul Kiska. He is live at the Justice Center in Cleveland. Paul?
Well, Danita, just before 4:30 this afternoon, family members of the victims started coming out of the courtroom. They came out into the hallway here at the Justice Center, and despite dozens of members of the news media, security, bailiffs, it was very quiet in the hallway at that point. 3 family members of victims stopped to talk with us, but only one took the time to actually give us some lengthy comments. We'll hear from her in just a moment. But first, this was the scene inside the courtroom as the verdicts were read, an emotional scene inside the courtroom. Some family members of victims actually rocked back and forth as they heard the jury foreman say guilty over and over a total of 82 times. AMELDA Hunter's sister, Denise Hunter, and her cousin, both Crystal Dozier, were killed at the hands of Anthony Sowell, now a convicted murderer. And AMELDA Hunter said, finally, there is justice We asked her what she wanted from the sentencing. She said no comment at this time. After the families came out of the courtroom, both the attorneys came out. First, it was Rufus Sims, the defense attorney of Anthony Sowell. He came into the hallway very quietly. News reporters, we were asking him for any comment. He said there's a gag order. He cannot talk. He will not talk until the sentencing phase. Then a different scene as Rick Bombeck, the chief prosecutor in this case, who won this case this afternoon, he walked into the hallway. He was smiling. He appeared happy, but again, he said he had to respect the gag order and will not make any comments on this continuing case now because we still have the sentencing phase scheduled for August 1st, at which time this same jury, which has now served 4 weeks, will come back here and decide whether Anthony Sowell lives or dies, and then Judge Dick Ambrose will have the final say. Reporting live from the Justice Center, Paul Kiska, News Channel 5.
Paul, I know at 6 o'clock you're going to give us the sound bites from some of the victims' family members you talked to, but did you get a sense that with today's verdict that they are sensing closure in this, but still at the same time it seems like the wound is still very fresh?
Well, I think you summed that up very eloquently. That was the exact impression I got. Nobody actually confirmed closure, but the wounds are still very much there, and that's evident. They did not come out of the courtroom ecstatic in any regard, more emotional, and it seemed as though they're looking to the next phase, which is still a very key phase of this trial for the victims' families, whether Anthony Sowell gets life in prison without parole, or the death penalty paying with his life.
All right, thank you very much, Paul Kiska, reporting live for us tonight at the Justice Center. We'll see your report later at 6 o'clock. Many of our Newsnet5.com readers have been following the trial from inside the courtroom with our special blog. That blog is just one part of our special coverage on this historic murder case. You can read more information about the trial of Anthony Sowell anytime on Newsnet5.com, and we will continue with more coverage on the verdict later, live on 5.